decided we're going to go on a bike ride because today's probably going to be the last warm day of the year. And while we're out, I figured it'd be a good time for me to share a little bit about what we talked about this past weekend and something that I think is very important for people in our culture to hear. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that while we're out. These 5 points that I shared on Sunday and the 5 points I'm going to share in this video are not mine. I would love to say that I was the one who wrote these 5 thoughts, ideas down, but it's not me. This comes straight from Tim Keller, which is a pastor from he's a pastor from New York, and he's done a lot of work on identity and a lot of conversations on identity. So these 5 points are coming directly from him. Some of the stories and things like that are stories that I'm going to share with you about my life and illustrations that are about my life and things like that. But the 5 points are directly from Tim Keller. Just a side note, just so you know. We're going to head to Hungry Mother and we're going to go on a little ride. So this past weekend we started a brand new series called Who Am I? And we just talked about our identity, and we talked about where we find identity and how most of us use our cultural methods to build our identities. And so we worked through 5 reasons as to why that doesn't really work, and I want to share those reasons with you here, just as kind of a recap, but also for those of you who maybe weren't there. I think every culture has methods for its people to develop and figure out who they are. When we look back at like a more Eastern culture, and more traditional cultures even, what we find is that people would grow into whoever their family needed them to be, or whoever their, village or tribe or whoever needed them to be. I mean, you look at Jesus even, and Jesus was what? He was a carpenter, right? And what was his dad? His dad was a carpenter. And the reason was because the community, the family needed for whoever the child was to be that thing for them. And if you could do that, then the culture celebrated you, and people thought, yeah, that's awesome, you're being exactly who you should be. But in the Western culture, it's the exact opposite. We want to figure out who we are. Instead of trying to fill a need for our community or fill a need for our family, we just want to be who we want to be. And we look inside and we think that looking at our feelings and the deepest desires of our hearts are the way that we figure out who we are. And that's just not true. Neither, though, are actually a biblical way of figuring out who you are and developing an identity. And so I want to share with you just those 5 quick things as to why you can't build an identity, that it has to be given to you. And the first one is that it's just an incoherent idea. Your desires are always conflicting against one another. Like, I don't know about you, but the things that I want are often like different. So I may say I want to live in this place, but I also want to do this job, and it's like I could never do both of those things, right? Or I want to have this group of friends, but I also want to be able to do this in life, and because those are also contradicting, I can't have both, right? And so our desires are always contradicting, and those are just a couple of examples, but I guarantee if you think about your own desires, you've got some that are very contradicting, that it's not even possible to have both. And so first reason is it's incoherent. The second reason is that it's unstable. You think about something today and have an opinion about something today, and in a month, that thing's going to change. Think about the things that you had opinions about even a year ago and how much change has happened in you to what you now think or believe about that thing. Our feelings about things are always changing because we are always changing. And so this idea that I can figure out based on my desires that are always contradicting and my feelings that are always changing who I am, I'm never going to actually know who I am, right? Because we're always changing. I mean, I think about myself whenever I was a senior in high school, and I'm like, why did I say or do some of the things that I did when I was a senior in high school? It doesn't even make sense. Like, why did I think those things? And then I think back to when I was 20 years old, and I'm like, why did I think those things, right? I was such an idiot when I was 20 years old, thinking and doing some of the things that I did. And you know what I know? Is that when I'm 30, because I'm 25 now, when I look back at myself at 25 years old, I'm going to be like, that guy was such an idiot, right? Like, why was he thinking those things? And you know what that means? That means we're always idiots, right? No matter what point in your life, because you're always changing, you're going to think differently about your previous self. And because you're always changing, it's just not possible to figure out who you are based on desires and feelings, because it's not consistent. It's always changing, and if you're always changing, then how will you ever know who you really are? So that's 2 reasons. Reason number 3 is that it's an illusion to think that you can even choose which feelings to go with. I mean, I just said, your feelings are always changing, your desires are always contradicting. So think with me for just a moment. How can you pick and choose between all those different feelings which ones you should go with? Right? Like you think, oh, I have the freedom to choose, and I have the freedom to pick out of which desires I want to go with, the feelings that I want to go with. But that's just an illusion. It's not accurate. You don't have that freedom. And the reason you don't have that freedom is because the culture will always choose for you. The culture is always deciding which feelings to go with. And think for just a moment, if we look back at a warrior 1,200 years ago, if he had two feelings, one was he looked in the deepest parts of himself and he said, I'm an aggressive person. I like to smash things. I want to fight people. Like, that's who I am. Or he had these feelings of emotion and he wanted to cry all the time. Which one of those feelings is he going to choose? Again, we're thinking about 1,200 years ago, and in that culture that he was in, which one of those feelings is he going to choose? He's going to think the emotional one is ridiculous and think the emotional one is just insane. I'm not going to feel that. Like aggression, that's who I am. I'm going to choose that one because that's what the culture said. But if you think about today, the exact same situation, think about it for a moment. If you have a guy today who has these feelings of aggression, who wants to fight people all the time, who's angry all the time, and then he also has these emotional sides, and he does want to cry, and he does feel these different things. Which one does the culture tell him to choose? You know it. The culture is going to choose the emotion, right? And so therefore, people today most often choose that feeling, not because it's what they desire most, but because that's what the culture tells them they should have. I mean, if you feel those aggression, want to fight people all the time today, what do we tell you? You should have therapy, right? Like, it's because the culture changes. The culture is different. And this idea that I can choose my feelings and I actually get to choose without the culture telling me it's just not accurate. I want to give you a quick example. Like, literally today we're out biking, me and Andrew, he's over there, but we're out biking, and I have sunglasses that I dropped, and my sunglasses have chips in the lenses. Like, literally there are chips in the lenses. I would show you, but I don't know if you could see it on the camera, but there are chips in it. And randomly, as I'm riding, I will see something out of the corner of my eye, or think I see something out of the corner of my eye, like flying at me, but it's really just the chip that's in my lens, right? And so it's like that with the culture. It's like we're looking through these lenses and we think we see something, but it's not what's accurate. It's just an illusion, right? It's not really there. And it's the same is true here. You think freedom exists. You think you have the freedom to choose what you want or what you do not want. But the reality is, it's just an illusion. You don't have the freedom. And the culture is telling you what to choose and what not to choose. Reason number 4 is that it's huge pressure. I mean, think about the pressure that all of you are under right now. I mean, every time I have a conversation with someone who's a teenager or even just generally in life, people are stressed out and they feel constant pressure. And I think part of that comes from trying to figure out who they are rather than just accepting the fact that someone gets to name them. And we're going to talk about what that means later. But what I'm saying is it's crushing, right? It's outrageous pressure. And what we just talked about looks like freedom is actually slavery. And it's slavery to yourself and to the culture. And because it's constantly changing and it's constantly leading you in different ways. And how are you ever supposed to figure out who you are if everything is always changing? What may look like freedom actually is slavery. And there can be freedom found when you actually step into an identity that is not one that you've achieved, but one that you just receive. I mean, think about for a moment the ones that you achieve. Maybe it's that you are an athlete, or you're an artist, or you play music, or I don't know what it is. You're really smart, and you build this and that's who you are. That's what you would define yourself as. And then what happens the moment that you meet someone who's better than you at the thing that you have built your identity around? Your entire identity comes crashing down because you think that you're the best at that thing. I share on Sunday night what I kind of found my identity in some ways was a sport. Like, I loved basketball, and in my community, I was one of the better basketball players, and my identity was built on that. And I go off to college, and I meet a bunch of people who are way better than I am at basketball, way better than I am. And I can tell you, that was a huge blow and huge pressure, and it was crushing to me because my identity was wrapped up in something I did. It was something that I had achieved rather than something that I had received. And when that happens, I guarantee you felt it. When you've met someone smarter than you, when you've met someone more athletic or more artistic or more creative than you, suddenly you think you're the best, and then it all comes crashing down. Because you've built an identity on something that you have achieved rather than just building it in the thing that you have received. So reason number 5 is that it's excluding. And the reason I say it's excluding is because if you've built your identity, if you have found your value in yourself and your own abilities, then you're not really proud of the person you are. God, really where your value comes in what you do. And so what you find is that you actually are excluding other people. You feel better than other people, which is why you feel valuable. I shared that story with you about basketball for me, and I felt value in myself just because I felt like I was better than someone else. The moment I met a bunch of people who were way better than me, my value seemed to drop. My value, what I thought my value was in, went away. and it was crushing, and it was pressure, right? That's what we talked about just a moment ago. And so any identity that we build is always going to be excluding. I heard a quote one time, and I can't remember where it's from, what book or anything, but it's just said, you're not proud of having money, you're just proud of having more money than your neighbor. I would argue that an identity that's built on anything that we do, you're not really proud or have value in yourself in that thing. You're just more proud and feel more valuable than the next person. And if you have not received an identity and you've achieved one, it's always going to exclude everyone around you. See, an identity that's received is one that I can look at other people and I can feel compassion for them. And when they're better than me at things, I don't care, because my identity and my value is not in what I do. It's been given to me by someone who is way better than me, by someone who is far superior. And when I can find identity in him rather than in something that I do, I can be inclusive to the people. I can bring people into my life and not be afraid of people who are better than me, and not feel superior to people when they aren't. And so this identity that's built is always going to be exclusive, but an identity that's found in something that we receive. And that's where we're going to go. One of the ways that you can know for sure that you have put your identity in something else rather than in the person of Jesus is if you can't handle criticism. And so, for example, again, going back to the basketball analogy or the basketball story, I remember if someone said anything negative about the way that I played, it was like a piercing thing to my heart, right? Because I thought, man, they are criticizing who I am, right? They weren't just talking about the thing I did. They were talking about me, because I couldn't separate the two. And so if you find yourself not able to handle criticism, there's a good chance that you've placed identity in that thing, right? Like now, if you criticize the way that I play basketball, it's like, okay, it doesn't bother me because it's not where my identity is anymore. I would suggest to you guys, if you look into the things that you do and the things that you may be criticized for and you can't handle it, maybe you've placed some identity there. You've misplaced identity in that thing. So think about that. Think about the things that you can't help or can't handle criticism in. I guarantee you'll find some misplaced identity in that. So I gave you 5 reasons earlier why this whole idea and this whole concept of like figuring out who you are based on desires and feelings and all that just really doesn't work. And I want to give you 5 reasons 5 things that do work, and 5 reasons that Jesus specifically works, which, I think when we look back at those 5 reasons, mainly the thing that shows up is inconsistency, right? Like it's because our feelings are changing, our desires are changing, our culture is always changing, everything is inconsistent. And so when we look back at those 5 reasons, number 1, 5 reasons Jesus doesn't work. Number 1 is he doesn't contradict himself. Like at no point is Jesus going to be contradicting between what he desires for you or desires in the world to happen. It's not going to be these contradicting ideas. It may not be something we totally understand, but it won't be contradicting. So that's the first reason. Yours are always contradicting, but he is not contradicting himself. And the second thing is that he's never changing. Remember, we said we're always changing. Our desires, our feelings, all that is constantly changing from year to year, from week to week, from minute to minute. But Jesus is constantly consistent. Like he is always the same. And because he's always the same, that means we can put faith and trust in the thing and then the person of Jesus and who he says we are, rather than who we figure out trying to figure out who we are. And then the third one is like, remember we said it's an illusion to think you can name yourself, because your culture is really what the filter is that you're looking through. But here's the thing, Jesus isn't looking at you or his creation through a filter, right? Like we have filters whether we like it or not, but he's not looking at it through a filter. And when we allow him to name us, it's not ultimately slavery, right? It's not, we have that idea that if someone else gives us a name or someone else gives us an identity, then that means we're enslaved to that thing. But here's what I can say is like being in Jesus, finding an identity in him is the most freeing thing that you can possibly experience. It's not a slavery. It's not being enslaved to anything. It's just accepting who he says we are. In the only person, the only thing that is constant, that is not changing, that doesn't have a filter. If we can accept who he says we are, then we can know who we are. And not be someone new tomorrow and someone new the next day, but we can know who we are. Well, We just got back from riding and it was a lot of fun, and I want to finish the conversation that we started out on the lake. Reason number 4 that you couldn't was because it was crushing and it's a ton of pressure, and why would you want to live and exist in that pressure? Right? I said it's not really freedom, it's slavery. It's slavery to the idea that I can actually choose, because you will be chasing who you are and trying to figure out who you are for the rest of your life. But because you're always changing, you'll never be able to figure out who you really are. And so this whole idea, it's not freedom. It's truly slavery. And so, but in Jesus, and because he tells us who we are, because we can know who we are, that's where true freedom lies. It's where freedom exists. And that's why he's one of the reasons, that's why this is one of the reasons that finding an identity in Jesus actually works. Reason number 5 was that it's excluding. Remember we said, like, you look out and you see other people and you're not proud of who you are. You don't see value in yourself. You just see value in yourself when you're better than the next person, right? And you think of yourself as less valuable if someone's better at something than you are. But in Jesus, because it's not something that we've earned, it's not something that we have achieved, it's not something that we even deserve. We can look and because of this identity is none of those things, I can look at other people and I don't have to feel better than them or feel worse than them, because they're in the same boat as me, as they get to receive a name, right? And so if someone's better than me at something, I want to celebrate them. If someone is not as good at me at something, then I want to help build them up and help them to be better. I don't want to keep them down so that I can keep feeling better about myself. And I don't want to tear the people down that are above me, right? I want to keep building them up too, because this is not something that I've achieved. It's not something that I have to maintain. It's an identity that I have received, that I just get to live in and walk in freedom in. And I want to encourage you to do that. I want you to think about that. You have that opportunity by simply finding an identity in Jesus rather than in the culture. And the reason we talked about these, and we started here in this whole series of Who Am I, instead of me telling you exactly who you are, I want you to know that culture is trying to tell you who you are, and I want you to not mix the two together. Because we might include Jesus in our identity, but it's not about including him. He's not just a card in the deck that we play, right? He is what is encasing us, all things. That all of the things as who we are. I mean, today we went on a bike ride. I love riding bikes. It's something I've really enjoyed. Haley and I got this bike a while back, and I have ridden it a ton. And I could say, well, now I'm a mountain biker, which I'm totally not. But let's say I said that was who I am. Like, that's just a part of something I enjoy. That doesn't mean it's who I am. Who I am is a forgiven, loved person by God, who's been given a new name, a new identity, a purpose, who's been given value, and I don't have to earn it. I just get to live in it. And you talk about freedom. That is freedom. And I want that for you. And so that's why we're talking about this. So next week, I'm going to have another video out, something along these lines. I don't know what day exactly it's going to be posted, but we're going to keep having videos throughout this series just talking about this, trying to answer the question, like, who am I? And just recap what we talked about on Sunday night. So if you were there on Sunday night, this is a recap. But if you weren't there, I want to encourage you. We'd love to have you in person, but even come back next week and listen to this. Think through this, what we're talking about, because if you can understand that your identity is not something you have to build, I'm telling you, you're going to find so much freedom, and we want to help you do that. But anyway, I hope to see you in the next video. We'll see you later.